Um, Imagine this scenario for a moment. You are trying to balance a highly competitive, grueling, full-time job.
Right. And we're talking about a role where your physical performance is scrutinized daily.
Exactly. Demanding supervisors, intense pressure to succeed, and you are constantly pushed to your absolute physical limits. Now, uh, imagine that at the exact same time you're working that job, you are also taking on a full-time university course load.
Which for most of us, just hearing that schedule sounds completely unmanageable.
Oh, totally. But for a division-like collegiate student athlete, that is just a standard Tuesday in October. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are tackling a really complex question today, and our mission is to uncover the hidden variables that determine whether someone thrives or, completely drowns under that specific kind of immense pressure.
Because the stakes for these individuals are incredibly high. The dynamics at play go far beyond just natural talent or raw intelligence.
Yeah, to figure out how this actually works, we're pulling from a really compelling piece of source material today. We have a 2011 doctoral dissertation from West Virginia University by Samantha J. Monda. It's called At-Risk Student Athletes and Academic Achievement.
It's a fascinating qualitative study.
It really is. She took an intensity sample of 12 first-year Division I collegiate football players. The setup here is just a perfect foundation for a deep dive. She interviewed these 12 freshmen right after their fall 2010 semester, and she divided them into two distinct groups based on their academic survival.
Group A and Group B.
Right, Group A is the successful group. These are 6 players who managed a GPA over 2.75 with 0 failing grades during that really grueling first semester. And Group B is the unsuccessful group, 6 players who ended up with a GPA of 2.0 or below. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Before we look at the specific differences between these two sets of students,
Yeah.
what is the broader landscape we need to understand here? Like, why was a university looking so closely at this back in 2011?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this research was taking place during a highly critical era of NCAA academic reform.
Right, the APR stuff.
Exactly, the academic progress rate. For decades leading up to this, there had been growing public concern that the massive corporate culture of college football was severely eclipsing the fundamental educational mission of the universities.
The big business of it all.
Yes, the institutional reality was that many programs were essentially chewing up and spitting out these young men. So the NCAA instituted strict metrics, most notably that APR.
So suddenly, universities are being held publicly accountable in a way they really hadn't been before.
Exactly. If a school had a poor APR score because their athletes were failing or dropping out, the program could be penalized with heavy scholarship reductions or even bans on postseason competition.
Wow, so it wasn't just about optics anymore. It was about the bottom line and the actual survival of the football program itself.
Yeah.
Universities became highly motivated to figure out exactly why some student athletes succeed in the classroom and why others fail.
Simply to identify at-risk students before they became ineligible.
Right. So if motivation is the engine driving the whole machine, let's look at why these specific students cared or didn't care about school in the first place. When you look at the successful group, their priorities were actually really surprising.
How so?
For these players, academics were actually at the top of the list. They exhibited high intrinsic motivation and a massive capacity for delayed gratification.
Ah, delayed gratification. That's huge.
It is. There's a specific detail from the text that perfectly highlights this. One successful walk-on player explicitly stated his dream was to become an orthopedic doctor.
Wow.
Yeah, he fundamentally recognized that if he slacked off during his freshman year, that medical school dream was just dead on arrival. He knew the work he was doing at 18 would pay off a decade down the road.
He was working for his entire future, not just a passing grade.
Exactly.
That is the absolute hallmark of intrinsic motivation. They are driven by an internal reward. Now let's look at the unsuccessful group. Their motivation was almost entirely tethered to the sport itself.
Totally different mindset.
Completely. They exhibited very low intrinsic motivation for their coursework. They frankly didn't find the classes interesting, and they only cared about staying academically eligible so they could get back on the football field.
To them, the college classroom was simply a mandatory toll booth on the highway to playing football.
And hopefully reaching the NFL.
I saw a quote from one of the unsuccessful players who basically said, degrees aren't even on their radar until high school forces it on them. And then they realize it's the only way they're going to keep playing sports.
It is a purely transactional relationship with education.
Right, but I mean, wouldn't the sheer threat of losing their scholarship be enough to force them to care? At least a little bit.
What's fascinating here is how that transactional mindset actually sabotages them.
Really?
Yeah, which aligns perfectly with the expectancy value theory mentioned in the text.
Okay, break that down for us.
This theory tells us that human motivation comes down to two core pillars. First is your expectancy, or your self-efficacy. That is your belief that you actually have the capability to complete a task.
So, having the right key to a door.
Great way to put it. The second pillar is value, which is how much you actually care about what is on the other side of that door.
And the unsuccessful players simply didn't value the academic outcome.
Not at all. They had an outcome-focused mindset geared only toward athletic eligibility. And psychological theory shows us that when you do a task purely out of compliance,
Just to avoid punishment or stay eligible.
right, rather than out of genuine interest, your motivation steadily decreases over time. The cognitive friction of doing something you don't value actually inhibits your performance.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah,
If you don't value the destination, you aren't going to put gas in the car no matter how nice the car is.
exactly.
But it's hard to build that intrinsic motivation if you've never even been asked to try. If motivation is the engine, what kind of fuel are they bringing from their high school experiences?
The pre-entry characteristics.
Yes, the disparity in how these two groups were treated before they even stepped foot on campus is eye-opening. The successful group arrived feeling prepared. They had rigorous high school experiences.
They were used to the workload.
Yeah, one successful player talked about having to write a 15-page research paper his junior year of high school. And the kicker is, it wasn't even graded.
Really? Not graded at all.
No. The teacher assigned it purely so the students would learn how to cite sources and manage a long-term project before college.
That is incredible preparation.
It is. They also engaged in what the text calls vicarious learning, watching older siblings or upperclassmen teammates navigate college academics, so they knew the pitfalls to avoid.
Then you have the unsuccessful group,
Oh man, the unsuccessful group.
who experience a jarring shock to the system upon arrival.
A total shock.
Right.
There is a quote directly from the text that paints a very different picture of high school preparation. One unsuccessful player admitted he basically took a year off academically in high school.
Just coasted.
Coasted is putting it lightly. He said he barely ever picked up a book to read, and he described his high school English class as, quote, cake.
Cake. Wow.
He hadn't taken a math class since his junior year, and he openly admitted he had never had to study a day in his life.
And then suddenly he gets to a university.
Right. The classes are back-to-back, the reading volume is massive, and he is just drowning in the coursework. Is it entirely their fault if the high school system gave him a free pass for 4 years?
What's fascinating here is the dark side of high school athletics, specifically regarding severe grade inflation and entitlement.
The sense that the rules don't apply to them.
Exactly. Many of these unsuccessful players essentially admitted they were pushed along. Because of their athletic status, they were given special treatment.
So people were doing the work for them.
Yeah, one player noted he was always helped along and people would just do things for him. This practice might seem supportive to a high school coach wanting to win a state championship, but it fundamentally ill-equips the student for reality.
It sets them up to fail.
It does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can look at Tinto's theory of student departure.
Okay, how does Tinto's theory frame this kind of high school experience?
Think of Tinto's theory like planting a tree. You can't just look at the soil it's planted in today to understand why it is struggling. You have to look at the health of the sapling before it went into the ground.
Ah, I like that analogy.
Tinto posits that a student's initial commitment to college is heavily dictated by their pre-entry attributes. This includes their family background.
Whether their parents consistently emphasized education or were maybe largely absent from the process.
Right, and their prior schooling experiences. A student whose prior schooling spoon-fed them passing grades because they could throw a football is a sapling with incredibly shallow roots.
So when they're finally transplanted into the rigorous soil of a university system,
Their integration is going to be incredibly turbulent.
you can really see how that turbulence hits them when we look at the brutal reality of a Division I football schedule. So you have a kid whose academic roots are shallow, suddenly planted in a hurricane.
A literal hurricane of scheduling.
Right. What's crucial to understand from the text is that both groups struggled with a severe lack of recovery time. This wasn't a scenario where the successful kids just had easier class schedules or lighter practice loads.
Everyone was in the same boat physically.
Yeah, exactly. Both groups were waking up for 6 a.m. workouts, going to morning classes, heading to afternoon practice, hitting mandatory study hall, and their day wouldn't actually end until 9 p.m.
They were all running on empty.
Completely empty.
The physical toll just cannot be overstated here. Imagine your muscles are aching from a high-impact practice. You've been taking hits. You've been yelled at by coaches for 3 hours.
And then you're expected to sit under fluorescent lights and absorb college-level calculus.
Exactly. When your brain is slowing down from sheer physical exhaustion, doing academic work becomes an uphill battle. But the key insight is how the two groups responded to that identical fatigue.
The divergence here is staggering. The successful players practiced an almost ruthless form of time management.
They had to.
They really did. There's an anecdote in the study of a successful player who learned very quickly that he could not wait until the last minute. On his very rare free days, even when he was completely exhausted, he would force himself to write just 1 or 2 pages of a paper to knock a piece of it out.
Just chipping away at it.
Yes. He explicitly talked about sacrificing social invitations. His friends would ask him to go out on a Thursday night, and he would say no because he refused to be up until 2 a.m. cramming for a deadline.
He consciously chose short-term sacrifice for long-term stability.
Exactly.
And the unsuccessful group succumbed to the fatigue, which, frankly, is a very human response when you are physically battered.
It's totally understandable.
When they had a rare moment of free time, they used it purely to physically recover or to socialize. They actively brushed off studying on the weekends. As one player put it, they operated with a mindset of, I'll just wait till Sunday.
The famous last words of any college student. I'll just wait till Sunday.
Yeah, right. But by Sunday, the reading assignments have piled up, the physical fatigue is still lingering, and their academic performance just plummets.
I think anyone listening right now who has worked a demanding job can relate to this on some level. I mean, when you are utterly exhausted at the end of a long week, do you prioritize your long-term goals, or do you default to immediate comfort and recovery?
It's tough.
It is not an easy choice for an adult professional in their 30s or 40s. But these 18-year-olds were forced to navigate that impulse control every single day while their bodies were physically aching.
This naturally leads to how the university tries to help them manage that overwhelming load. Universities pour massive resources into academic support. We are talking about armies of tutors, mandatory study halls, academic mentors.
They invest heavily.
Very heavily. But the text reveals a profound paradox in how this support is actually utilized by the two different groups.
What was the difference?
The unsuccessful students suffered from a severe lack of autonomy. Because they were so accustomed to being pushed along in high school, they treated the college academic support staff less like teachers and more like personal assistants.
That dynamic is so interesting. There is a specific quote where a failing player described his academic support person as a calendar.
A calendar.
Yeah. He said the tutor had his entire week mapped out and set up, so all the player had to do was show up, do the bare minimum worksheet that was placed right in front of him, and leave.
Wow.
They were entirely dependent on the system. I think anyone listening who relies heavily on productivity apps can see the danger here. Are you actually organizing your life and taking charge of your responsibilities, or are you just blindly following push notifications?
That is a great analogy.
Right. Because for these struggling students, the university tutor was basically an unchecked push notification.
They weren't learning how to learn, they were just executing a checklist someone else wrote for them. They had zero ownership over the process.
And the successful group.
Conversely, the successful students certainly used the university support systems, but they actively sought to become independent from them. They wanted to take self-responsibility.
They wanted to own it.
Exactly. One of the successful players actually formally requested to be removed from mandatory study hall after his first semester.
Really? He asked to leave.
He did. He had maintained a high GPA, and he realized he could handle his online modules and homework entirely by himself in his dorm room. He didn't want someone standing over his shoulder telling him when to read. He had developed robust self-regulation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've talked about all these differences. The intrinsic motivation, the high school preparation, the time management, the autonomy. But there was one surprising trait shared by both the successful and unsuccessful groups.
What was that?
Both groups lived in a total campus bubble.
Ah, yes, the bubble.
They experienced almost complete isolation from the rest of the university ecosystem. Neither group reported spending much time interacting with non-athlete classmates. They didn't attend normal campus social events, and they didn't really get to know their professors outside of mandatory interactions.
Their entire social and academic universe consisted of their football teammates.
Exactly.
If we connect this to Aston's theory of involvement, the implications for their personal development are huge.
How does Aston theory explain it?
Aston's theory is essentially saying that a college campus is like a giant gymnasium for personal development. Your growth is directly proportional to the quality and quantity of your involvement in that broader campus community.
So, expanding your horizons.
Right. The more you engage with different types of people, diverse ideas, new environments, the more you grow as a person. Now, both of these groups of athletes were highly involved, but only in the football subculture.
They lived together in the same dorms, ate together at the training table, worked out together at dawn.
And often even took the same introductory classes together.
It's just an absolute echo chamber.
Exactly. And Adler and Adler's research, which is cited in the dissertation, warns about the specific danger of this exact kind of normative influence.
Formative influence.
It's essentially peer pressure on a structural level. It dictates what behaviors are considered normal within a group. If a player is already unmotivated academically and they are isolated in an echo chamber that primarily prioritizes athletic glory over academic achievement, the results can be highly detrimental.
So if your entire peer group thinks reading the syllabus is a joke, and you have no friends outside that football circle to show you a different perspective on college life, you are incredibly vulnerable to academic failure.
You just adapt to the lowest common denominator of the group. Even the successful players who managed to keep their grades up likely missed out on the broader developmental benefits of the college experience because their world was so narrowly focused.
So what does this all mean when we step back and look at the whole picture?
It's a lot to take in.
It really is.
Yeah.
When we review all this incredible source material from the dissertation, it becomes clear that surviving and thriving under extreme pressure wasn't just a matter of raw intelligence. The successful students in Group A weren't magically smarter than the failing students in Group B.
No, it was behavioral.
Success was a potent, complex mix of intrinsic motivation, autonomous learning, and the discipline to delay gratification. And critically, these traits were largely forged long before these young men ever stepped onto a college campus.
It comes down to preparation.
It was about the roots they grew in high school, how they were challenged by their early teachers, and what they truly valued for their own long-term futures.
This translates directly to your world, regardless of what you do for a living or what kind of pressure you face. Whether you are managing a complex project at work, trying to learn a difficult new technical skill, or guiding a team of employees, the underlying psychological principles remain the same.
The need for autonomy.
Yes. Spoon-feeding solutions, just like those high schools did for the struggling athletes, or the well-intentioned college tutors acting as personal calendars, ultimately destroys autonomy.
They're not doing them a favor.
Exactly. If you remove all the obstacles for someone, you also remove their opportunity to develop self-efficacy. You deny them the chance to realize they are capable of solving hard problems. Real, lasting growth requires the friction of doing the heavy lifting yourself.
That is such a powerful takeaway about the necessity of friction. It leaves us with a final, provocative thought to really ponder today. Universities are pouring millions and millions of dollars into tutoring and elaborate academic support centers to keep these athletes eligible to play on Saturdays.
Millions.
But if those systems are functioning more like personal assistants rather than actual teachers, are we actually preparing these young adults for the complexities of the real world? Or are we just engineering a completely different kind of dependency under the guise of helping them?
It's a tough question.
Think about the support systems in your own life right now, whether at work or at home. Are they genuinely helping you grow and become more fiercely independent? Or are they just doing the heavy lifting for you so you can comfortably check a box? It is definitely a question worth asking yourself. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We love unpacking these hidden dynamics with you, and we will catch you on the next one.